Serious. What is the creepiest or most unexplained thing that's happened to you that you still think about to this day? Was camping alone in a small one-person tent. All snug and secure in the tent, I went to sleep. Was woken by a clap of thunder at 3 a.m. to discover both the inner and outer tent door was wide open. That was freaky. I've had raccoons open my tent doors before. Probably that edit. Never in a million years did I believe this would blow up. I was camping out in Yosemite when this happened. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling something and there was a raccoon sitting on top of me and I freaked. Ever since, I leave my zippers at the top of the tent door. I was living in Boston. I woke up at 3 a.m. or so by my cat jumping up on my bed and curling in between my calf muscles and going to sleep. My cat would do this every night since I was 5 years old. That was his spot. It was something I was very familiar with. Thing is, my cat was living with my parents on the West Coast. So I couldn't understand what the hell I just felt. But I knew it was my cat. I just figured I was dreaming. Got a call from my parents the following morning that my cat died around midnight the previous night. 3 hours behind since I was on the East Coast. Guess that was my cat traveling to Boston to come see me one last time. Edit. After so many replies, I got to say this. Really, I wasn't dreaming. I remember it quite well. I said maybe I was dreaming because I am doubtful myself. But thinking back, yeah, I was wide awake and realized my experience. Despite being a fun believer in ghosts, suspension of disbelief. I haven't had any other experiences other than this. This is my own experience and I expect and appreciate the doubt. But call it what you will. I fell asleep on the couch and got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Once I got there I realized I didn't have to go. I headed towards the bedroom but decided to turn around and go back downstairs to the couch. When I got there I saw my body still asleep curled up on the sofa. I don't remember what happened after, and I know it had to have just been a dream. But, it still freaks me out to this day to think about it. LMAOO, you became your own sleep paralysis demon. Maybe around age 14, early 90s. We were traveling from TX up to Tacoma, WA. We were about out of money, almost out of gas, no food, stuck in Chico, California. I sat in the car while Mom took my younger sisters to the restroom at a gas station. I was riddled with anxiety about our situation and looking down. The car door opened and I looked up. A lady that looked like a brown-haired Brady mom sat in the seat and faced me. She said, "It seems like you're down on your luck. Take this and give it to your mom. Tell her to pay it forward someday to someone who needs it." I looked down into my hand and there was a $100 bill. I looked up and she had disappeared. Nowhere in the parking lot, just vanished. I cried. When Mom came back I told her what happened and she cried. We got gas. There was a guy selling oranges on the side of the road and we bought a bag and went to a local park that had a part of the river with a little spillway dam and went swimming and ate oranges for a couple of hours before getting back on the road. I never saw the lady again but she saved us and we did make it up to Tacoma to start our new life. Thank you, stranger lady with invisible powers, we never forgot your kindness. In college I was roommates with my childhood best friend for about 2 years. We are very trusting with each other, we would go into each other's rooms freely and grab whatever we needed. To borrow clothes, hairbrush, perfume, etc. No questions asked. Just a knock if we were in the room to let each other know we were going in. Our rooms are across the hall from each other, with the hall facing the kitchen. So from the kitchen you could see down the hall where our rooms were. At the time my friend had very long black hair and she's very fair-skinned. One day, I get home from work, with my headphones in my ear talking to my mom about my day. I go in the kitchen and grab a snack. I see her walk out of her room and go into mine, leave my room and go back into hers. She looked like she just got out the shower, her hair was soaking wet and she was wrapped in a white towel. Her long black wet hair is what I distinctly remember. Also, she made no eye contact with me but I didn't think it was weird. I didn't say anything to her since borrowing each other's stuff was normal. I'm still on the phone with my mom so I don't think much of it. I grab my snack, hang up with my mom and go into my room to watch TV. I figured she's getting ready to go somewhere and we'll talk later. About an hour passes and I go to the kitchen to clean the plate I ate on. I see her in the kitchen making something to eat and I tell her, "Hey, what did you grab from my room earlier? Did you find what you needed?" She looks at me like if I was crazy and says, "What are you talking about?" So I say, "Yeah, earlier when I got home I saw you go into my room and grab something. Did you get what you needed?" "Sorry, I didn't say hi, I was on the phone with my mom." She asks me if I'm sure I saw her. I said yes, 100%. She tells me to grab my phone and go to her car ASAP, that she needs to show me something. I had my phone on me and she grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter along with her purse and she drags me out the front door and into her car. She then tells me she got home maybe 5 minutes before. We started talking. She had spent the night at her boyfriend's and hadn't been home all day. So she has no idea who I saw. I'll never forget the look on her face when she told me this. Complete fear and panic. She called the cops and they came along with the apartment manager. They checked the whole apartment and found no one. Nothing amiss. And they were in there a while checking every nook and cranny. The manager got maintenance to change our locks and gave us new keys that day. My friend then tells me that for a week she'd been hearing noises from her bathroom like bottles moving, and when she went to check she found nothing. I have no idea who I saw going in and out of our rooms, but it looked exactly like my friend. I don't drink or do drugs. Not on meds. This was in 2014 and I still freak out when I think about it. Good for your friend actually taking action. Because it's a creepy, unexplained thread, the immediate thought is ghost or something, but IRL the fact that she paid attention to the noises and made sure there wasn't someone actually in the apartment is good thinking. I had a recurring nightmare of a pitch-black parasite sucking the life out of me. Sometimes it waited for me in dark corners to go to bed. My cats always slept on my bed during that time. For me it was a very stressful time. I got an itch at the place of my chest where I dreamed the parasite was sucking my life out of me. I got sick and felt a pea-sized lump. I went to my doc and they ordered a biopsy of that lump. As it turned out I had male breast cancer at the age of 28. After I got well again the dream never came back and my cats slept in their places again and not on my bed. The dream was creepy enough. What it made for me were my cats protecting me. When I was 17 I had just gotten off my shift at Wendy's and was sitting in the parlor for my ride and a middle-aged man approached me about a job offer. He asked me questions about my job and Wendy's, then he told me about the job he was offering. He said there were other girls and they all lived in like a dorm and the job came with benefits. It was in an office setting and other things I don't remember, but the entire time every danger bell in my body was going off full blast. It felt like my body became a vibrator. I don't remember if after the multiple rejections from me he left or if my ride had come and I zoomed out of there. The only thing I can think to this day is, did I almost get sex trafficked? Edit. In 1987 I was taking the Greyhound by myself from Toronto to Calgary. I had breakfast in the bus station restaurant and a young man joined me and we had a nice chat. He asked me to come to Sault Ste. Marie with him instead of going to Alberta. I told him no. He kept asking and got more and more insistent. My bus departure was called and I got up to go get on my bus. He followed me and tried to force me onto the bus to SSM. I got away from him and got on my correct bus. I had never heard of sex trafficking then, but now I'm pretty sure I was a target. Glad I didn't get pushed into that bus. That happened just after another sketchy experience with an older man, so I kinda had my hackles up. They were very well-timed hackles. Glad you're safe. I once woke up in a tent in the middle of the night while camping in the Upper Peninsula with my friends. I heard this dude shouting and screaming about a bear, telling it to fuck off and stuff. Naturally I woke my buddy up and told him what was up and he said he could hear it too. We got out of our tent and searched for almost an hour around the campsite and found nothing, then proceeded to find a Red Wings hat that was neither of ours. We took watch turns the rest of the night. And I'm pretty sure he still has the hat to this day. Note: Up is a term used by people familiar with Michigan as the Upper Peninsula, the arrow-looking thing above the mitten. I once caught my neighbor staring at me outside my bedroom window while I was straightening my hair with no trousers on, and I immediately ducked under my windowpane as soon as I saw him. He was legit stood in this alleyway that connects the street's back gardens, arms crossed and there for at least 15 more minutes just staring through my window. I even got a picture of it. Pretty sure I was 15. Once I was hired to load firewood into my aunt's basement. She lives alone and left the basement door open for me while she went out. I usually swing the interior basement door as wide as I can when I walk in, and the door almost never closes completely, but once I heard it close, and when I was about to grab another load I saw that the deadbolt locked. When I walk in my arms are filled with firewood, so I wouldn't be able to lock it myself. Looked out the window and checked the garage to see if she came home, but she wasn't there. The door itself was enclosed, so no wind to shut it. I tried various ways of slamming the door so it would lock by itself, but nothing worked. It's an isolated house, so I would have heard someone drive up, and it's highly unlikely someone walked over just to lock the door and leave and time it while I was piling up firewood, and there's wooden steps, so I would have heard someone walking down them. It's the only time I've seen a deadbolt lock itself in my life. Just a normal Saturday night. I was watching TV home alone with my 2 dogs, when I heard a banging sound coming from the basement. Legit sounded like somebody was just banging something on the appliances we had down there. Now there is no access into the basement from down there, only through the upstairs rooms that I was in, and knew nobody could have come in and got past me. So with this knowledge I was not as scared as you may think, more curious as to what the heck the noise was. One of the 2 dogs, who is a meathead and wants to fight everybody, also heard the noise and was now bolting down into the basement to investigate. I get down and see that it is my other dog, banging his head into our dryer and chest freezer, which are next to each other. My meathead dog has just stood there watching confused. So I approach my other dog and calm him down, and we all go back upstairs. Now this freaked the heck out of me and upset me, as it seemed such very strange behavior for my dog to do. Fast forward only 30 minutes or so, the banging starts again. I instantly look over to my dog, but he is lay down, but now also aware of the noise downstairs. We run down into the basement, and it is Meathead now banging his head in between the appliances. Again, I now calm Meathead down and we all go back upstairs. Nothing has ever happened again since that night. 3 years now, so that ruled out brain tumors, which is what I read online about why maybe dogs bang their heads, but 2 dogs, suddenly on the same night, and it only affecting one of them at any given time. 3 years and the 3 of us never talk about that night, lol. Edit. Wow, thanks for all the awards and updates. To answer a few questions. Yes, I have posted this story before. I have a very normal life, and this story is just way out there but legit truthful to my otherwise mundane life. A few folks say it may have been a rodent, treat, toy they were after. No. They were frenzied and hyperventilating. When they get things stuck under anything they just cry and get me to get their stuff. I guess it boils down to just knowing your dogs. I know instantly from their body language just what the deal is, but that night, I have never seen them so frenzied and upset. Also, it is otherwise a very nice basement as basements go. I have never had a pest problem down there or in any other part of the house. Somebody mentioned that if it only happened 3 years ago, why did I not make a video of it? My first instinct was to help my dogs, to stop them harming themselves. At no point was my first thought to go and grab my phone to capture the moments on film. Really surprised I have to mention that one. But people, keyboards, warriors. It would be much creepier if one of the 3 of you would talk about it besides you. I've shared this before, but it still confuses the hell out of my family. Edit. This happened last year. I copy and pasted it from my original post. The beginning of the story says last night, but this was almost a year ago. We moved out of that house about 6 months after this happened. My husband recently took an overnights job to help us out during COVID. He's only been there about 2 weeks and works evenings, overnights, 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Last night was no different. He left home around 8:15 p.m. Our daughter, age 11, and I decided to make it a movie night. Around 11 p.m., I heard keys in my back door and the usual sounds my husband makes when he comes home. I creep out to the kitchen to make sure it was him, and it was. He told me he needed to grab his knee compression sleeve, walks down the hall, says hi to our daughter as he passes the living room, and goes upstairs. He came back down, gave me a kiss and left again. We finished our movie and went to bed. In the morning when he got home I made a joking comment about him forgetting his knee sleeve. He was genuinely confused as I recalled the previous night. Our daughter confirmed everything I said and he still was acting confused. I pulled up our security motion camera on my phone to show him when he popped in quick. But there was no footage from the night before, or any other night, of him coming home after he's left for work. My daughter and I both heard him, saw him, and I touched him. But he was never home during that time. Nothing else out of the ordinary happened that night. We seriously have no idea what happened. Edit to clarify, there is footage of that night, but it doesn't show him coming home at that time. The camera was on the back porch, not inside the house. We had 2 carbon monoxide detectors, one on each floor of the house. We moved out a few months later for unrelated reasons. I apologize for grammar of spelling mistakes. There was a kid in another class at my school in 6th grade that was genius. I don't mean like, oh he's really smart cause doesn't need to do the homework and still gets a 100s. Like he's was doing advanced calculus with a local college professor after school. This kid was smarter than everyone. So one day our computer system for the entire school goes down. I was in a poorer area at the time, so this was normal. This was occurred many times, so normally it would affect us cause we barely used laptops and such. The only class that was affected was the computer class. This kid was in the computer class. 3 or so hours later when I'm class with him during social studies. 3 guys with FBI jackets on and our local chief escorted him out of the building. We were told nothing, the parents were told nothing. It never hit the news. To this day we have no clue what he did. Except every single teacher I've asked about this says they were also told nothing. I haven't seen the kid since and I can't find a trace of him going to any other school or ending up in trouble. He just fell off the face of the earth with his parents. Yeah, I forgot to mention that parents also disappeared and no one really looked for them after a month or so. I still think about that kid. If someone in the 6th grade is smart enough to do something that makes the FBI arrest him so urgently that they do it while he's in school, then they probably gave him a job. My nana, great-grandma, and mom were very close but lived overseas from one another my whole life. They talked on the phone every Sunday, but because it was an international call, it was extremely expensive, so they took turns calling every Sunday at 8 a.m. to make the cost equal. However, due to a 4-minute difference in clocks, Nana always ended up calling at 8:04. Also, the caller ID never showed up. Mum called on a Sunday, Nana died on a Tuesday. The following week, we're sitting at the table eating breakfast, and Mum notices it's 7:50 a.m. Nana would have been calling any minute. She gets emotional, I comfort her. Then at 8:04 a.m. the motherfucking phone rings. The called ID reads, unknown caller. We look at each other like, what is this, some sort of sick joke? She answers there's nothing but static at the other line, and some garbled voice recording. The only decipherable words in it are, we hope you enjoy your trip to paradise. Click, phone cuts off. Absolutely no explanation for that one. Still baffles me to this day. Edit. I've been wanting to tell this story for years now, but every time I find a creepy, inexplicable thread it gets buried. So glad people are finally hearing this one, lol. Some have said maybe someone was playing an elaborate prank, but I'd prefer to see it as Nana sending us one last hoorah. She really loved my mum and I a lot, as we did her, too. She was a really kooky lady and this ending was extremely fitting of her. I woke up in the bath at a very specific time, like 5:45. Twice. 10 years in between. Water was getting cold, I was naked. No memory of getting there, some fragments of like seeing my own hand turning on the tap. No drugs or alcohol or even medication involved. The worst thing was the fear. When I woke up I felt an inexplicable, almost primordial, dread. Lasted for hours, I was shaking, couldn't function. Still freaks me out thinking about it. Might have been 3 times, I can't remember properly. I still get the shakes from the memory. Edit to add. Oh gosh you guys. Thank you so much for the awards. My first. Sounds like sleepwalking. Waking up from sleepwalking in any place other than where you fell asleep can really mess with your brain. Right after quarantine started I got a package in the mail. It was addressed to my name and my address and contained one pink starburst and nothing else. To this day, I have no idea who sent it or why. The return address was a vacant office space across the country. Edit. I did not eat it. The postmark matched the address I believe, but it's been so long I'm not positive. There is one friend I'm thinking could have done it, but she has since passed away. It was not sent from overseas. It uses my full name, which I don't go by for anything except legal documents. I have a nickname I use almost exclusively. We had only been in this house for 8 months before I got this and we don't really know our neighbors, and my Amazon account is under my husband's information. And thank you for the awards. If that's a prank by someone you know, that's a really good one. They know you'll ponder about it the rest of your life. I was driving home from work on a long, somewhat dark road. I'll admit I was tired and cold and just wanted to get home. Speed limit was 60 mph and I was doing closer to 70. Suddenly, a girl with long blonde hair, a black coat with brown fur on the hood and jeans just showed up in front of my car. I knew there was another car to my left up ahead, but it was black and all I saw was that it was stopped before I saw her. I managed to maneuver around her. I was freaked out. I turned to a side street and stopped to figure out what was happening. Then a tall guy with a black coat and short hair gets out of the driver's side of the stopped car. Grabbed her, dragged her to the car while she was fighting him, and put her back in the car. I called the police and gave them the description of the car and the direction it took off in. I never heard anything about it, and I have not stopped thinking about her since. It's been 2 years. Edit. Just in case anyone is curious or could even know something, the location was Lincoln, RE, U.S. next to the high school. February 2019. The car was a new black sports, maybe, car with the taillight going all the way across the back of the car. George Washington Highway. I've shared this before, but I still think it's an interesting story. I was exploring the area behind my house shortly after we moved in. The area back there had once been a small quarry that had since filled with water. It was a pit of pond that supposedly went straight down 60 feet if you stepped into it. I was walking along the edge and I came across a backpack filled with old video game cartridges and a set of clothing just laying on the ground. They were for the N64 and we found this around 2004, so they were outdated. Next to it was a set of clothing. The clothes were laying on the ground, spread out, pants and shirt, so it looked like someone laying down. They looked like they'd been there a long time. Same with the backpack. I told my parents and they called the cops. There had been no reports of missing children or anything in the area. We never got an explanation, but it was weird. Edit. Just to answer some questions. I don't think it was a prank. While we were new to the neighborhood, we were renters. Also, most of our neighbors were elderly. This happened in a rural Virginia town and I can't imagine anyone wasting cartridges like that since most kids were lucky to have an N64. No people, adult or child, had been reported by families or the neighborhood as missing for years. They never searched the quarry because they never had any reason to think there was something wrong. My sister and I went out there every day for a year or so and just avoided that spot because I was creepy. As far as I know, they're still out there. I was deployed to Iraq and we stayed in a former prison in Baghdad. During the night we would see and hear strange things. The base at this time only had soldiers, but we would hear children playing from inside the prison. One day we decided to dig deeper to see where the kids were. When we finally found where the noise was coming from, we found a room with the ceiling caved in. We didn't find any kids but found kids' books, toys and kids' clothes. Everything looked like it wasn't moved in weeks. We continued to hear the kids in the year we spent there. My girlfriend and I are in a long-distance relationship. We typically take turns traveling between each other's countries, Australia and Canada. About 2 years ago, it was my turn to travel over to Australia to stay with her and her mom. For a bit of background, my GF's room was built as an extension, add-on to their garage. So to get to it, you had to walk through their garage to get to her room. About a couple weeks into my trip over there, I wake up at around 1 o'clock am and the room is just glowing red. I look up at the ceiling and I see this black figure crawling through the ceiling. It moved in such an inhuman way, almost like it was breaking every one of its bones to move. I start screaming, which wakes my GF up, and she looks up at the ceiling and starts to scream as well. Instinctively, I grab my pillow and whip it at the figure. The next thing I know, everything went black and I'm waking up a few hours later. My GF is fast asleep, so I think it was just some weird dream. At that point, I have to go to the washroom. So, I walk through the garage and try to quietly open the garage door to get into the main house. Previously, her mom had mentioned that she was getting annoyed with us staying up late at night and going through the garage door to use the washroom. Since her mom's room was down the garage door hallway, each time we would open it, the door would click loudly and wake her up. So, I'm standing there at the garage door and I try to open it as quietly as possible. As I turn the handle and the door clicks as I push it open, her mom just starts screaming at the top of her lungs. I thought it was out of rage for waking her up, so I immediately close the door and speed walk back to my GF's room. I climb into bed and gently nudge her awake to tell her that her mom is screaming. She gets up and goes to see whether her mom was still angry and try to de-escalate the situation. About 20 minutes goes by and my GF comes back into the room completely silent. She asks me if I saw the room glowing red earlier as well as a figure in the ceiling. I say yes and she goes wide-eyed and says that she thought it was just a dream too. She then says that her mom wasn't screaming at me. Apparently, when I opened the door, it did wake her up, but when she woke up, there was a black figure standing at the foot of her bed and it was slowly moving towards her. She then experienced a blackout as well and was woken up by my GF checking in on her. Yeah. The entire house slept with the lights on for a month after that. Edit. Thank you for the awards, kind strangers, as well as the emotional support. I was about 10 when this took place. I'm in my early 30s now. I remember it was well into late night hours when I saw my grandmother was standing at the front screen door looking outside. She was talking to someone. I saw she was talking to my dad. I couldn't see my dad's face cause he was facing away from her. He was shirtless. He had a very large distinct mole in the middle of his back, so I knew it was him. He was mumbling something I couldn't understand. My grandmother was telling him something along the lines of, "If you love them so much, why did you go and do this?" My mom wasn't there with us to see this. She had left moments before after she got a call letting us know my dad had been driving drunk and hit a mule on the highway. My dad was in the hospital hanging on to life. Edit. Added age and approximate time. I had a schnauzer that could hear a cat stalk across a Persian rug. The slightest noise could wake her from a slumber and set off her constant barking. She made a great tent companion while on backpacking trips. Bears, raccoons and skunks would all get fair warning if they came within range of our campsite. One morning we woke up from a night without interruptions in the back country of SW Colorado and I found my tent's central guy line was no longer staked down by the aluminum stake that I had used but instead by a piece of aspen branch that had been carved into what looked like a tiki statue. Nothing too ornate but a snarling face with teeth had been carved from the bark and it had obviously been heated in a fire to give it a brown color. My dog didn't make a sound and I apparently slept harder than I thought. I scrambled out of the tent and looked around the small alpine lake and saw no other campers nor any sign that people had been around. Cut my trip short and hauled ass the 8 miles back to my car. Not a single other car in the lot at the trailhead. Well, not the scariest thing ever, but when I was 11 my family and I moved to another town because of my dad's job. We were only going to stay there for a year, and thankfully we were given a house in a closed community of about 20 houses made for army officials and their families. So one day my parents are out and they take my baby sister. My older sister is in a friend's house and I'm left alone with our dog for like 2 hours. I was playing in my room when I remember that the black socks for my Monday uniform, kind of like a suit you wear on Mondays, are drying in the backyard. I go there with my dog and utter out loud, "I wish there was something to do," and not a moment later I hear some young voice say very clearly, "Then let's play." I turn around to see my normally hyperactive Golden sitting looking at me like nothing has happened. I freak out immediately and ran upstairs to my parents' bedroom. I turn on the TV and hide under the covers until my family arrived. They saw me sweating, scared and paranoid at this point. They never figured out what happened but tried to make me feel better. Now the part that freaks me is that each of the houses in the community was surrounded by 3-meter-tall cinderblock walls. The place where my socks were was next to a wall separating from another house, one that had no children. The other house to the left was over 20 meters away and behind another wall, and the wall behind my house separated us from nothing but a steep hill. There was no one who could have said that, and to this day it freaks me out every time I think of it. When I was in high school, I would always be the first to arrive home out of my family, having the entire house to myself. I've never been superstitious or someone who scared easily, and the hour I had alone was my favorite time of the entire day. My bedroom is upstairs, and one day when I got home from school I placed my bag away and started up the stairs. About halfway I stopped because I thought I heard something coming from upstairs, so I stayed and listened. I heard a very slow rendition of the melody from Ring Around the Rosie, crystal clear, coming from my bedroom. I was 100% sure I was the only one home, and I had absolutely no device that could be playing music unprompted, especially Ring Around the Rosie. I froze in fear and listened for about 15 seconds to make sure I was really hearing it, which I was. I just turned back down the steps and waited around in the living room for my family to get home before I went back upstairs. I went in my room a few hours later and there was nothing out of the ordinary. I know it's not a very climatic story, but it's something I think about every now and then. I never told anyone about it because, why would I? But that was the first time something truly strange happened to me. I was putting my daughter to bed, and she was talking about her godmother. We were reading a book that her godmother had gotten her. Her godmother died in 2019, of breast cancer. She was my very best friend, more like a sister, and she doted on my daughter. We are reminiscing about her, and my daughter's twinkle lights she has on her ceiling starts going off. They have multiple settings and they are on the rainbow setting. Not too weird, maybe they have a short or something. I go to turn them off. They aren't plugged in. I figure it's my friend saying hi. She loved rainbows. I'm not superstitious, but she promised to stick around and haunt us. I find it comforting. Those lights still go off every now and then. My cat used to visit me after he passed away. I could see him move in the corner of my eye, just at the edge of my vision. Or I could feel his head pressing against my chin, like he used to. This went on for years, and basically stopped when we moved. I miss him. One of my cats had been missing for a few weeks. I had given her up as gone. While on the phone with a friend 100 miles away, who has never seen my house, he interrupts himself from talking about work and says with a strange urgency, "Doug, open your front door. Your cat is sitting on the porch waiting to come in." And of course upon opening the door, I find her just casually sitting there. We were both beyond blown away. Between sobs of joy I asked, "How did you know?" And he said, "I don't know, man." That was really weird. We had a rescue dog years back, terrier mix. We lived in the countryside on a wooded hillside and owned about 5 acres of woodland and rough fields, mostly wild. This dog loved to be up there chasing rabbits but loved her home too, so would never be gone for very long. One day she went missing. We took our other dogs up there and searched thoroughly but nothing. We had another friend bring his dogs, nothing. We advertised, put up posters, we did little but search high and low for 6 days but nothing. On the 6th day we had pretty much given up hope, but I decided to go up one last time because I had a hunch, a tickle in my belly, about one particular area which had already been thoroughly searched. I took a sickle and a pair of gardening gloves and hacked my way towards the center of a huge bramble patch. It was summer and all I could hear was birdsong and insects, but suddenly I heard a muffled yip. I called her name and then heard her again getting excited. She was deep underground in a rabbit warren. I stayed calling to her until help arrived. The local fire brigade were kind enough to come and help and advise, and we got her out eventually. She ran around like a demented muddy pup, and amazingly the vet said she was basically okay. Had probably been getting enough moisture from eating mud to keep her alive. I am not generally a fanciful person, but I just knew in my knower, she was there. No explanation for it. Not creepy as such, more just unexplained. As a kid I was round a friend's house after school. It was a sunny day, so we went to the park near his house, then through the woods there. His younger brother was with us as well. In the woods, beside the path, there were red berries on the ground. The berries had been arranged into 3 stick figures, which was weird as there were 3 of us. We got back to the house, and my friend and I decided to go back to take another look. His brother stayed at the house. When we got back there were only 2 stick figures. My friend snapped a photo on his phone, then kicked the berries, and we ran back to the house. I have no idea what was going on. Was it just some kind of prank being pulled on us? Edit. Changed, floor, to, ground. I meant ground. I have no idea why I typed floor originally. Probably raccoons. I had a short lucid dream. And the scene happened a few days later. I am 200% sure about that because I keep a diary of my dreams, and it matched perfectly. I have things like this happen to me occasionally. I will dream a mundane conversation or activity, and a few months later I will be halfway through said action or conversation when the dream flashes back into my head. Despite knowing what is going to happen next, I am unable to change any of it. The most memorable occurred when I was about 14 or 15. I played soccer at the time, and I had a dream about being in front of a mirror, like where the mirror and sink are separate from the rest of the bathroom like at a hotel, and I was brushing my hair and putting it up like I always did before games. I quickly forgot about it, and a few weeks later I accepted a position on a team that would be going to a national tournament in Tennessee. Flash forward like 6 months and I am in the hotel brushing my hair exactly like in the dream. The mirror, sink, and room are exactly the same. Nothing else eventful happens and I shake off the uncomfortable feeling and move on with my day. I talked to my dad about it at dinner one night that week and he has said that it happens to him sometimes as well. Edit. Thank you everyone for all of the kind words and awards. This is the first time that I've had a post blow up like this. I've really enjoyed reading all of your similar experiences, and it really makes one think about what is going on in the world. P.S. To all of the naysayers, I'm sorry that you've never experienced this phenomenon, but maybe stop diagnosing people over the internet on a post where no one was asking for advice. I promise that I have never had a single symptom related to seizures, and I'm not dying. I just have had some strange dreams that came true. It is a phenomenon that, while a bit unnerving, is completely harmless and only happens occasionally, and a lot less as I've gotten older. In high school, AOL was new and chat rooms were super popular. I was 16 when we finally got the first PC and AOL and the whole works. Creepy old men would lurk in generally teenage-run chat rooms because creepy old men. Some guy started messaging me, he was in his late 30s, but it was the internet, who knows if he really was. He could have been 78 for all anyone knew. I was a teenage girl, why would I be interested? So I told him to not talk to me. He then made a fake account claiming he was a teenage boy, but then he started talking like he did before and I caught on. Why so much effort to talk to a plain 16-year-old? I filed complaints, but only so much can happen when he hasn't really done anything illegal. Whatever. So one day, my parents are out and my brother is gone. The home phone rings and it's him. He tells me he knows I'm alone, my parents are out, he knows what my house looks like, he describes it over the phone. He tells me he could easily come to me if I asked him. I told him I'm not amused and to just stop. He disappeared after. No idea. It was just weird. Still no clue. Edit. Well, crap, I had no idea this would gain any type of attention, let alone this many comments. I sincerely have no idea what happened. Maybe he was an expert mindfucker and he was experimenting with how to really mess with someone. It worked, though. I have really no idea who he was or where he lived since the internet was new and the accessibility to find information wasn't what it is today. He could have been a teacher, a 67-year-old man, a strung-out whack job down the street, a truck driver, who knows. I just find it unbelievable that he disappeared and that he tried so hard to creep on a teenage girl. Ew. We used to have a night out every Christmas with the lads from high school. We went back to one of the lads' houses and were all drunk having a good time when one of the lads pointed into the kitchen and said, "Who's that?" The kitchen was like a box room, you could see the whole room from the doorway. I had my back to the wall where it was and turned to look in. The lights were off and there was no one there. We all looked and said, "What are you looking at?" He was adamant and just stayed sat pointing and just said, "No, who are those two there?" The lad whose house it was looking in and turned on the light and again there was no one there, and we all said, "Are you okay? What are you on about?" He said, "Look, that fella is leaning on the worktop and the other is leaning and pointing and laughing at me." We all kept saying there was no one there. After a back and forth for about 10 minutes, he was describing what they were wearing, etc., and then the lad who could see these people realized we couldn't and started freaking out, tearing up and shaking uncontrollably, saying he had to get out of the house. He was shaking that much we had to put his shoes on. Once he had gone and being drunk, no drugs, that we knew of. We just laughed it off as him being off on one, but the lad whose house it was said he described his uncle and granddad who had long since died exactly how they used of stand and what clothes they were wearing. I wouldn't have believed it if I wasn't there, and honestly I still think he just had a mad episode. We have all met his granddad and uncle before they died, so it could have been some mental moment he had. To this day anytime we mention it he refuses to talk about it, and doesn't even entertain any notion of it. Like I said, it sounds far-fetched but that is 100% true. I don't believe in ghosts etc. and still think he had a moment, but it was genuinely weird and unsettling. Edit. Thanks for the awards, kind strangers, so soon after posting. Didn't think this tale from my past would explode. Edit. Added more detail, it seemed a bit vague. Edit. A few people have asked, so to tidy it up, this guy has no history of any mental illness or anything else. To this day he has a stable, solid career and home life. I know that isn't always a solid indication everything is okay, but after 15 or so years he's never shown anything of the sort. A friend and I from high school used to go out to this old county road and smoke a joint on a big hill facing a large, old brick house across the street that sat in a large field. The face of the house had 2 rows of 6 windows each, facing the road. One night we were chilling on said hill and looking out at the house as the sun was going down, and all of a sudden a light turned on in one of the windows and then shut off. Then another random window lit up, then shut off. It kept going. Faster, faster. A window would light up and shut off and then go to another. It did it for about a minute and eventually was doing it so quickly it couldn't have possibly been a person going room to room or even a person with access to multiple switches at one time. After about a minute after speeding up to random flashes it stopped. It simply didn't make sense. We both saw it. We talked about it many times afterward. The only thing we can figure is if the homeowner had some kind of automated lighting system hooked up to all the rooms and was messing with us. Other than that, I have no idea. Sketchy AF though. Edit. Some of you chalking up the experience to cannabis. I don't think you understand how weed works. I've never hallucinated from being high in my life, and it would make 0 sense for me and my friend to have the same hallucination at the same time. My grandma and I both saw a dead person in our laundry room once. So, the laundry connected to the kitchen by a doorway. The doorway connected to the living room, too. One afternoon, Grandma needed a hamper, so I followed her to the laundry. We saw the dead person as soon as we stepped foot in that doorway. It looked to be about my height. I was 6 or 7-ish, and totally black. Not as in a black person but a literal black coating on its skin. It was slumped near the washing machine. We only saw it for a split second, enough time to register that it was there, and then it was gone. I remember my grandma saying, "Did you see that?" and laughing it off. She got the hamper and did her thing, and I just avoided the kitchen for a while. And on a semi-related note, I used to have the freakiest nightmares in that house. I had nightmares so graphic, so often, that my pediatrician wanted me to see a therapist. Ninja edit. I'm not a wholehearted believer in ghosts, but I do still wonder what it was. My grandma always describes it as the garbage bag because it was about that big, and slouched in the corner like trash. A few years ago, I was at my lowest point in life. Several people close to me had passed away unexpectedly. I was being bullied every day at my job. My life was falling apart. I was past being depressed. I just couldn't imagine waking up another day. So I'd planned my suicide, bought a one-way plane ticket, got sleeping pills, and wrote a series of suicide notes. On the day I was to fly out to fulfill my plan, there was a terrible accident on the freeway to the airport. It was shut down both ways. So I drove into a nearby pub to have a beer and wait out the traffic. The second I sat on the patio with my drink, a gentleman asked if he could sit with me. Whatever, I thought, sure, who cares? He told me that whatever I was doing next was a terrible idea and I would regret it. I thought, who is this random fucker? But I listened. He said that he sensed I was in pain, but that I had an incredible life ahead of me, and that this was not the way my story was supposed to end. Again, I'd never met this guy in my life, and hadn't mentioned a word to him about my plan. He asked me to hand him my keys and my wallet, and he'd give them back to me after I talked and he listened. I poured my heart out to this random guy. Told him all my traumas and pains in life and why I was heading to the airport on a one-way ticket to kill myself in a cemetery across the country where my family was buried. He just listened. And then he pulled out a lighter, asked me to pull out my suicide letters and helped me burn them. He told me I was worth so much to the world and that after I finished my drink, I needed to head home and get some sleep. He told me I was going to be okay tomorrow, and I believed him. He then gave me my keys and wallet back. I left that afternoon and went home, hugged my family. Got some sleep, and the next day, I started working on myself, finding a therapist, a new job. Years later, I'm in a fantastic place in life, so far from where I was that day. To this day, no one in my life knows how close I came to killing myself. But this random stranger just somehow understood me. And saved my life. I never saw him again, I don't even know his name. It's the most unexplained thing that has ever happened to me. And I think about that guy every day, so, thank you, kind stranger, for saving my life that random September day on a pub patio. I used to work in a nursing home where I cared for dementia patients. Every patient on the hall I worked on would steal spoons from dinner to give to the kids, because they like shiny things. It got to the point where once a week I'd have to go through everyone's room to take back the spoons. I asked the patients about the kids many times but never got a good answer. I'd hear things like, "They just live here," or, "They stand outside in the snow and look in the windows," or, "They're my friends who visit." Wouldn't be so weird if they all didn't do it, but it was everyone. The ones who were still capable of speaking anyways. One time at 3 a.m. one of my patients started screaming, so I ran in her room and found her laying in bed, seemingly fine. I asked what was wrong and she said, "That boy is here again and won't get out of my closet. I'm scared." Like me too, Dolores, what the heck. When I was in 3rd grade, one moved to a new town and into a new house. We lived in a camper in the backyard of the house while we renovated it. It was a pretty old house. Anyway, during renovation we found all sorts of stuff in the walls: old bottles, old pair of glasses, letters, old newspapers, old pictures of children in school clothes. It was a 2-story house and the stairs were kind of a focal point for all sorts of creepy stuff. So once you got to the top of the stairs there was a little landing before it went into 2 bedrooms. At night we would always leave the light on in the landing in case we had to get up to use the bathroom. Me and one brother shared a room and the other room was for our older brother. I refused to sleep upstairs due to how creeped out I was, so I always slept downstairs on the couch. One weekend my sister, who is older than both my brothers, came to visit and was in my oldest brother's bedroom alone, as we were all at school and my mum was at work. As she was sitting up there watching TV she heard footsteps coming up the stairs. And called out as she had thought my mum was home early from work. No response other than the footsteps turning around and heading back down the stairs. When she got up to look there was no one home and all doors locked. It doesn't stop there. My oldest brother was left home alone for a week while me and my other brother and mom and dad went on a week-long vacation. Naturally he had his girlfriend over for a couple nights to keep him company. One night she got up to pee around 3 a.m. and went downstairs to the bathroom where she said she heard children whispering. A couple nights later around 3 to 4 a.m. the GF woke my brother saying someone was in the house. They heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Since the light was on in the landing, they could see a shadow underneath the door like someone was standing there. And the doorknob began to shake. Luckily it was locked. They both started to freak out, and my brother jumped up out of bed. We had some of those dumb display samurai-type swords that aren't even sharp and he grabbed one of those and went towards the door. They heard more footsteps running down the stairs and he bravely or stupidly followed down the stairs where he was met with an empty house. All windows and doors closed and locked. He called the police but nothing came of it. This will get buried but oh well. Lol. JK. Back in 2008, I lived near my college in an apartment. My apartment was set back from the main road quite a bit and was in a wooded and hilly area. One night, I was out running near sundown. I'm at the bottom of a hill that's behind my apartment so it was near the end of my run. I look up ahead at the top of the hill and notice 3 guys on bikes just sitting there. Being a 20-year-old female, my spidey senses start tingling. I tell myself I'm psyching myself out and it'll be fine so I keep running. I'm about halfway up the hill. The 3 guys are still just sitting there, facing my direction. I don't have a phone or anything and nowhere else to go so I tell myself I'll just run as hard as I can and scream if I need to. Suddenly, I hear something coming up beside me. I look to my right and see a German Shepherd. He's running alongside me. I've never seen this dog before in my life. I can't explain it, but I just knew I'd be okay now. I continued running up the hill with this random dog beside me. When we're approaching the guys, this dog gets slightly ahead of me and runs directly in front of me instead of to my right. He gets to the guys and stops dead in his tracks. I continue running and pass the guys without even making eye contact. Once I'm past the guys, the dog catches back up to me and continues running alongside me. He stays with me until I take the turn into my apartment's very well-lit parking lot. He disappears into the trees as quickly as he appeared. I took that route at the same exact time every single day after that for weeks and would drive down that road often, hoping to come across him again. No luck. I never saw him again. My friends are all convinced he was a guardian angel making sure I stayed safe. I'm not really a believer so I DK, but it's the most creepy, bizarre, and awesome thing to ever happen to me. I was probably about 16 to 17 and had just gotten home from high school. My brother was in the kitchen making a ruckus, so I started that way. As I passed by his bedroom, I saw my mom in there, sitting on his bed with the lights off, facing away from me and towards the wall. I stopped and stood in the doorway and asked if she was okay, and what she was doing. She said really slowly, "Just sitting. Come here, I need to talk to you." I took about a half step into the room when I heard my mom yelling for me in the kitchen and then saw her setting the table. I looked back to the bedroom and there was nothing there. I don't think I ever went back into that room by myself again, even 10 years later. Edit. Another story from the same house, since people seem to find this one interesting. One day my mom and I were out doing yard work in the front of the house. At the time we had a trampoline that sat in front of my bedroom window, which faced the driveway road. My 2 little brothers were bouncing on it. They were probably 7 and 9 at the time, and my mom and I had sat down in a pair of lawn chairs to take break. We were watching my little brothers play when suddenly they both stopped jumping and walked to the edge of the trampoline closest to my bedroom window and sat down, facing the window. They both started talking, but they were speaking as if they were having a conversation that we were only privy to half of. The older one, said something like, "Yes. Yeah, they're good. No. Okay," as if he was replying to someone asking him questions. My mom and I looked at each other like, "Are you hearing this right now?" And she asked them, "Who are you guys talking to?" Without looking away from the window, said, "She says it's great-grandma. She says she misses you." My great-grandmother had died before my little brothers had been born. They had no idea what she looked like. My mom replied, "Great-grandma is in heaven, baby." To which he looked over at us and said, "Not anymore." They stared at the wall for a little longer and then started playing again as if nothing had ever happened. This was, again, one of many incidents that happened at that house. I left Florida in 2017, and while I visited the family home many times since leaving, I'll never stay there at night by myself. And I try very hard not to leave the room I stay in. Sounds like raccoons to me, they are super clever. I was walking my dog once around the pond in my grandmother's condominium gated community. It was supposed to storm that night, so it was windy all day. Like tree branches violently flailing around and small items being blown away. I got to the front of my grandmother building. There wasn't a soul in sight, and suddenly it got really quiet. Which was weird because it was literally windy all day, but the wind suddenly stopped. I sort of looked around and felt off. It was the kind of quiet you could hear. Suddenly a big gust of wind comes in and my dog starts freaking out. I tug him to come towards the building so I could put the code in to get us inside when suddenly I hear a voice go, "Hey," right behind me. It felt like it was right next to my ear. I turned around and there still wasn't anyone there. And my dog was still freaking out. So I dragged him inside, ran up the flight of stairs to my grandma's condo and locked the door. I still have no idea what happened to this day. Edit. I should mention the gated community has a lot of buildings with geriatric folks living in it beyond my grandmother's condo. The area was used during the tuberculosis outbreak to bring patients to basically die, and they would cremate their bodies in a now abandoned building at the center of the gated community. I've also seen shadows in the window of the tower whenever I went to the park nearby. A few years ago, I took my dog out for a walk at night. The apartment complex I lived in at the time had enough light outside, so I was never scared of going out for a little walk. One night, as I walked down the stairs, I noticed a large brown furry thing under the stairs. I know for a fact there was 3 thin bushes under those stairs, but that night, whatever that thing is, was in between those bushes. I was too afraid to inspect it, so I walked the dog around the neighborhood for 5 minutes. When I got back, the large brown thing was gone. I stood there for a second before gathering up the courage to go up the stairs. My dog, however, refused to go up. I scooped him up and ran up the stairs into the comfort of my own home. A few days later I sat in the living room minding my own business. From the corner of my eye, I saw something brown and furry crawl from the ceiling into my room. That night, I had a dream I was being attacked by an unknown creature. I covered myself in my blanket and it scratched and tore at it, yelling obscenities at me. I got angry and launched myself at it, punching and scratching at a large brown furry creature. When I woke up, my dog was there watching me and whining. IDK, what to even think this was. Edit. Wow, I honestly expected this comment to get buried. Thanks to all of your input. I actually spoke to my mom about this. And what she said scares me even more. She has seen it crawl into rooms. but like me, chalked it up to her hair in her eye or something. However, she told me she also dreamt of it. In her dream, she was paralyzed, it was running around her and taunting her. She tried so hard to start praying but the words wouldn't come out. It got close to her face, she stared deeply into its demonic red eyes. She felt its fur touch her skin. When she broke out of her dream, my dog was staring at her, very close to her face. My dog almost got punched. LMAO, my mom's defense when she gets scared. So yeah, I guess we did see something in that apartment. Whatever it is, I am glad we moved out and it didn't follow us. Driving from Northern California to Southern California through the middle of the night about a decade ago. I was tired, and the scenery along the freeway through the Central Valley isn't very interesting. I remember passing an old silo, looking at my car clock and it was 3:17 in the morning. Drove some more, passed a power line, and it was 3:21. I blinked, shuffled in my seat, and passed that same old silo, and it was back to 3:17. I was in disbelief. I just stared at my clock for a few moments. Drove a little bit more, past the same power line, 3:21. Don't know why or how, but I went backwards about 4 minutes. Never experienced anything similar or since. I woke up for some reason and I heard the hammer of a gun being pulled back in front of my face. I could hear the metal on metal and the creaking and the clicks. I opened my eyes thinking I was about to die and nothing was there. The previous owner of the house had overdosed in the living room and used to deal guns. We found some in the attic. I sometimes wake up to extremely loud, unnerving sounds. It's called an auditory hallucination called exploding head syndrome. If it's ever happened before, after that it may have been that. I am a skeptic about ghosts and otherworldly beings. This event that happened causes me some consternation because it doesn't make any sense and I cannot explain what was happening. When I was in middle school, my family went camping in New Mexico. We were at a campsite near a lovely stream. My parents had one tent and my brother and I had another. As I was settling down to sleep for the night, I was listening to my headphones. I decided it was time to go to sleep, so I took my headphones off and was dozing off when I became hyper-aware of a sound. It was a slight swishing, scratching sound on the side of the tent. I had just assumed there was a breeze and a stalk of grass was brushing on the side of the tent. With a sudden jolt, I realized there was no wind whatsoever. I asked my brother, Jay, what is that? He asked what I was referring to. I pointed out the scratching noise. He took his hand and hit the side of the tent. In response, whatever it was, hit the side of the tent from outside of the tent. We both immediately began screaming hysterically. My parents came running and all the while the scratching continued. My parents said it was surely just a bug, a tent string or some vegetation and got a flashlight to look at the exterior of the tent. There was nothing. They brushed down the exterior, shook the tent, took everything out of the tent and shook it. The noise continued. I was completely in pieces, so I went and slept in my parents' tent and my father slept in the kid tent. My brother and father reported that the scratching continued all night long. Still puzzled and freaked out by this experience.